for this morning. I really want to welcome everybody here. Nikhil Shani, one of the CI attendees, but I'm really mostly here to introduce James Robinson this morning. I'm going to give sort of the boilerplate version, background bio, and then just give a little couple lines after that. So, James Robinson is a father of 3 sons, one of whom was born with single ventricle heterotaxy caused by primary ciliary dyskinesia. After his son's death at the age of 5, James was inspired to write a memoir about their family's globe-spanning medical journey. The book, titled More Than We Expected, reveals unexpected truths about the practice of medicine and what it means to live, grow, and heal. James has worked behind the scenes at the New York Times for nearly 20 years and is an adjunct professor at Columbia Journalism School. He lives in Brooklyn with his wife, Polly, and their 2 surviving sons. I'm going to take a minute here, and I hope many of you have had a chance to read the book, take a look at James's website. I had a chance to first hear James speak at the cardiac ICU meeting in San Diego.
I have mixed feelings.
And I'll be honest, right? There's parents that often speak at these panels. There's non-physicians that will speak, and many times you sort of just sit and wait patiently for the next speaker. This was a pretty big auditorium. It was one of the plenary sessions. I would say not of the 600, 700 people in that room, not a single person moved that entire time. I mean, it was truly one of the most meaningful, magnetic talks that I think most people in that room had ever heard. This was a group of, cardiac intensivists, surgeons, nurses, advanced practice providers, a real mix of people. After that talk was done, a lot of conversations about what a wonderful talk, how much it touched us. And then at dinner, I turned to my side, and James was sitting next to me. And Sadie, I don't know if Sadie's here, Sadie, had run into James in the lobby of the hotel, and Sadie, with her warm heart, invited James to join us to dinner. And it was really a wonderful meal, sitting with James, having a chance to talk about so many things we had in common, which I didn't realize. Like James, I have 3 sons. Like James, I probably love traveling a little bit too much. And I also like margaritas. Turns out we have a shared passion for margaritas. So that was really fun to learn about. And so I bring this here saying, I know James is here as part of cardiac because he had a child with congenital heart disease. But what he's going to talk about today is a lot bigger than that. I think, one of the things we talk about is how important details are, right? Those little interactions and how much it adds up. And I think a lot of what we're going to hear about today is not really cardiac specific, right? The details matter. You're going to hear from him how those little interactions, those little things that you don't think matter, actually really do matter. I think one of the things I took home at the end of that session, hearing his talk last year, was like, I'll be honest, right? We take care of more patients than almost any other program in the country. It's hard not to remember all of them, right? As providers, we sometimes forget. But as parents, they never forget, right? And they remember the things we do for them that we don't remember. And I think James's talk really reminded me of that. It really reminded me how important those little interactions are. Everything we do, doesn't matter where you are, the hospital, the heart center, outside of the hospital, how much it matters to our patients and to their families, it's really important. And so I think for all of us today, I think that's a really important take-home piece. I really want to thank, Sam Asakawa, Shova Iyer, Allison Mueller, Kathy Murphy for really helping to organizing this and bringing the patient experience team here, bringing the Heart Center here today, and giving James an opportunity to share a little bit of himself with us, just as a really important reminder how he shared a little bit of us with him, and we shared him with us, and how important that is for all of us. So thank you very much for all of you who are here today, for all of you who are here on the WebEx. I guarantee you this is going to be something you're going to walk away with and not forget for a long time. James, turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe, and everybody, the organizing group to help make this possible. I have to admit, as a New York Mets fan, being surrounded by a bunch of people from Atlanta, it's always a little awkward. But thank you for the warm welcome, and it's absolutely great to be here. So I'm going to talk today about our sons. This is why I'm here today. I'm a father of 3 sons, as Nikhil mentioned. Gilad, who is now 17, Yaniv and Nadav, who were both born on the same day, which makes them twins. But what I'm really going to focus on is Nadav, who passed away 8 years ago at the age of 5 after a remarkable life. I'm going to talk a little bit about what our experience, our 5 years with him, taught us about parenthood and the practice of medicine. Okay, I've been told that in medical talks you need to give some disclosures before you talk. I'm dad, not a doctor. I've written a memoir. It is for sale at Amazon.com. And this topic is emotional. There are going to be some photos. It involves the death of a child, and I completely understand, even for you in the medical profession, sometimes those things are difficult. So I give you full permission to take a minute. Whatever you need, leave. If it's too much, I get it. Not a problem. So even though I have to make these disclosures, they're for a reason. I'm not a doctor, but I've had 5 years of intense medical training. I've written a memoir so that we can have conversations like these. This is the main goal of me writing the book, is to share what we've learned with people caring for children like our son. And this topic is emotional because we're all human. And that is the subject of my talk today. So here's a little snapshot of my training. Nadav spent time in 4 hospitals in 3 cities over 2 continents. So we have a broad range of experience lasting his entire life. And I'll tell you how my medical career began. It began with the news that we were expecting twins. I actually sent baseball cards to my siblings when we found out to tell them, and they didn't get it at all. They're like, what? So maybe you'll understand. When you are expecting, you notice all these like kind of cool things, especially twins. We get very excited, you know, like when there's a double yolk, you're like, oh, that's kind of cool, right? Like, as a man, I did not know what it was like to carry twins. So when we found out their weights, I filled up these like coffee things with their weights and carried it. And I have a new respect for what it's like to carry twins. But at one of the anatomy stands, unfortunately, we had what was kind of a worst fear for a father. Which was not diagnosis at that point, but the knowledge that something was wrong with one of the twins' hearts. And that was eventually diagnosed as single ventricle heterotaxy caused by PCD, which is primary ciliary dyskinesia. And as soon as that diagnosis was made, we had to totally change the way that we approached pregnancy. Instead of going to the family OB/GYN, we went to a high-risk center. We also went to Mount Sinai Hospital, which is our home hospital in New York. And we got to know doctors. The doctor in charge of our care was named Shubika Rastava, who is now at Memoirs. She's fantastic. And we realized the doctors speak this impenetrable language that we did not understand yet. But luckily, Shubi, I'm sure you've seen one of these diagrams, drew us a diagram of the heart to make it easier, to help bridge, you know, the sort of esoteric language of medicine with the everyday language of parenthood. And we really appreciate that. Shubi also told us that we would need surgeries, and as somebody who's naturally inquisitive, I actually researched the surgeries that we were going to have, and I got a new respect for doctors as humans. I don't know how you know the story of the first heart surgery, the BTT shunt. Does everybody know that? Did I say that? Not everybody? Okay, if you do not know this story, scan that QR code right now. Hopefully it shows. Or email me, and I will send you the PDF of the story of the first shunt. It was done by a guy named Alfred Blaylock at Johns Hopkins University in 1944. He had a guy running his lab named Vivian Thomas, who was black. He was a carpenter's apprentice who was never able to go to medical school. He was hired as a lab assistant. And when Blaylock met Helen Taussig, a cardiologist, and decided to try this novel operation, Blaylock quickly realized that Vivian Thomas was the expert in the tools needed to perform this procedure, and actually invited him to be part of the surgery. That's actually him right there. This was not well received. Thomas was still like taking the servant's entrance into the hospital. In fact, the chief anesthesiologist refused to be attending at the surgery. Blaylock insisted on it. Thomas was there and actually guided him through the first surgery over his shoulder, telling him what to do. Absolutely incredible story. You look at anybody involved in this story and you realize that doctors are human. You have a black man who's prevented from getting the respect he deserves as a professional. You have Blaylock, who had the bravery to insist that he was there. You had Helen Taussig, who was deaf and was still somehow a cardiologist. And you realize that doctors are not these magical magicians or wizards, that they are human beings, just like us. And that was a very important insight for me. This is not the standard training that you give parents involved in the situation to tell the history of these surgeries, but I actually appreciate it and found it fascinating. Maybe I'm weird, but I thought that was interesting. You can also, if you don't want to read the PDF, you can watch a movie. There's a movie with Mos Def called Something the Lord Made. It's a little gauzy, but still tells the story really well. Okay. This is a reminder to the cardiologists in the room, don't call it a BT shunt, call it a BTC. Is that what?
You're good. You're good.
We're good? We're good. Okay. Terror. How's it terror? Okay. It's working. Okay. So, so the thing I always feared was having to tell his brothers that he had died. It wasn't like coming to coping with like his death, it was having to tell. And I think it's something doctors have to do a lot as well, and other medical professionals. And I really empathize with that. But there's something about when you're born with a heart defect, it is also this amazing source of wonder. It really is. I don't know how many of your parents, but when our first son was born, we came home from the hospital, just like giddy. We had brought this new life into the world. It was the miracle of life, and we were overwhelmed by like that amazing thing. When Nadav was diagnosed with a heart defect, and you research what actually caused the defect, it is utterly profound. I don't know if you guys know the role of cilia in embryonic development. No, no, nobody does. Okay, this is really cool. When you are conceived, you become a bundle of cells, which is completely symmetrical as an embryo. There's no difference between left and right. And on the surface of the embryo, there are these tiny hairs called cilia, which beat the amniotic fluid around in a certain pattern, which determines how your proteins are laid out and how your body forms. Okay? Crazy. I think it's crazy. If they're beating the wrong way and they go the other way, the body is a mirror image. That's called situs inversus. And if they're not functioning quite right, the proteins don't quite know where to go, and that becomes heterotaxy, which is basically things aren't in the right place, and it often affects the heart. I thought that was the most mind-blowing thing I've ever heard in my life. Like the wonder that that's how our bodies form by these little cilia beating the amniotic fluid around to determine how proteins go out, right? And it happens in the span of 3 hours, right? I saw somebody's eyebrows go up. Yes, okay, incredible. And that was the privilege of being his parent. Suddenly, I was exposed to like the wonders of the unknown as well as its terrors, right? And we had to balance those things out. Also, when you come face to face with the unknown, because that's essentially what was happening, there's a mystery about it. And we started noticing like weird coincidences everywhere. And this is one that I'm going to share with you. There's plenty in the book that totally blew my mind. Remember, this is the diagram that Shubi drew, right, when we first diagnosed. And she drew it by drawing little ventricles, right? These little 3 things, right? Well, when Nadav was born, we asked his older brother, Gilad, if he wanted to do like a little picture for him, right, when he was born. And he said, sure. And he pulls out a pink crayon, and the first thing he draws is, I don't know if you can see it, this little 3-fingered shape, right? Okay, which is like, man, I don't know what it means, okay, but like chills go up your spine when you see that. And you see that we saw that over and over again, like little coincidences or weird things that we sort of like grasped to, sort of evidence that the unknown was not like completely irrational. Also, with a heart defect, it comes in a certain way a source of pride, right? He had a totally unique anatomy. This is a drawing done by a medical student in the NICU after he was born, and it's beautiful. It's really beautiful, right? It's totally unique, and everybody was fascinated by it. They're like, really? Right? Okay, so something like pride that comes into parenting as well. And of course, it is a source of obligation, because suddenly you have to be responsible for your child's medical care, and that is also terrifying. Because to get home from the hospital after his BTT shunt, we have to learn to place an NG tube. You'll know what that is, right? Okay? So as a father, I had to learn how to put a little yellow thing down my son's nose without any help. And that was utterly terrifying, right? Just as the other things. But I learned to do it. There was a great NP who taught me how to do it. And suddenly I had a new skill that I did not have before. In fact, that is my secret talent. I can put an NG tube into a sleeping baby in the middle of the night with the lights off without them waking up. Yes, I can. I will not do it for you now, okay? But I can do it. I hope I can still do it. But there is a sort of like mastery of the medical responsibilities, which is also like a really interesting part of your identity. One thing that was really interesting to me early on was how ambiguous everything was. And maybe that's unique to our situation. But instead of being a definitive, yes, you do this and this will happen in medicine, often it is an educated guess. The doctors prescribed amoxicillin because he was a splenic. And nobody could agree on whether the amoxicillin had to be refrigerated or not. Right? Okay, that's a small, simple thing. Okay, but you see those things come up again and again and again. You've prescribed digoxin. Why? Because it helps. When should we wean the digoxin? I don't know. It's like gut feeling, right? Okay? Like, it's not guesswork. I don't want to disregard the expertise that you all have, but to a parent, like, to know that there's ambiguity is really, really, I think it's critically important, right? In part because parents are often best positioned to resolve that ambiguity. Nadav had a pulse ox that we had to put on at home, right? It was on his foot or his toe. It kept on falling off. We basically learned to tell the SATs by looking at him. We could tell. Okay, we knew. We would go in for the checkup, and the tech would like try to take a reading, and it would be 62, and we're like, it's not 62, and she's like, whatever, right? Okay, so we had to convince them, and finally got to where we knew it would be, right? These are small examples, but parents often become expert in things that they're ambiguous to doctors as well. And so that's why the best doctors view pediatric care as a partnership, right? They share knowledge without being condescending, as equals. They value parents' instincts and expertise, and they're honest and humble about what they don't know. Now, every time I give this slide, my wife says, you have to reinforce that last point, okay? So I'm gonna put a red box around it and tell you that it's really important when you are partnering with parents in a pediatric setting that you are honest about what you don't know. Okay, because otherwise parents will think that you have all the answers and you can predict the future, and I'm sorry, you can't. Okay, especially in a situation like this, which is so ambiguous. Should you fenestrate the fontan? Right? Like, these are all informed by certain pieces of evidence, but at the end of the day, you're making educated guesses, and parents need to know this. So I've talked a lot about the medical obligations of being a parent. One wise doctor at Mount Sinai said to us once, you have to remember that he is our patient, but he is your son. And so we have to remember to give our sons a normal life for all this craziness. And the way my wife and I do that, and this is speaking as somebody who drove to Atlanta, okay, is we travel. We travel a lot. We wanted to show our boys the world. We drove to the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia. Have any of you been there? Yeah, there's a giant heart that you can walk through, right? And for us, that was really cool because my wife was like, well, you don't have this, right? It was really cool until I got to the row of like surgical instruments, and I'm like, I'm out. Okay, that was neat. We drove to the beach in North Carolina. We eventually decided to pack the kids up and go in an airplane to San Diego. They did not fly it. They loved flying. It was great. And then suddenly I had this amazing opportunity after the Fontaine to basically get the most expensive paid trip to Australia, which is a country that I love because my mother is from there. My father's a New Zealander. It has a strong tug for us. We took our older son when he was a baby, and it was really meaningful. And we're like, should we go? And we had long discussions, and the doctors had long discussions. And eventually it was determined that it would be safe to go. Well, not safe to go, that it was the right decision to go. Okay? And these are decisions that you have to balance, right? Medical obligations and needs for like human things, which is like traveling and seeing the world, and playing with kangaroos. You have to balance those things. So we went. And for 2 weeks, it was great. We saw kangaroos, we met all of our cousins. It was absolutely fantastic. Until we realized that the dog was not looking great. And we wrote to Shubi back in New York, and she said, well, you should take him to the ER at a place called Westmead, which is a part of Sydney that I have never been to before. So we took him to Westmead, and he was diagnosed with a clot in his fontan. Right? Yeah, there's right, which is not good news because clots are tricky. I don't lecture you on how to deal with clots, but the upshot is we need an emergency surgery, and they weren't exactly sure what they were going to do. So we found ourselves in this crazy, strange hospital with these crazy, strange doctors speaking crazy, strange accents, with a crazy, strange situation, and the surgery was the most terrifying because he went in at 8 o'clock in the morning. We were given this torture device, which is a pager. Don't do this. They said, we love Westmead, like, don't do this, okay? They said, don't come back until we paid you, okay? So, like, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I was feeling pretty good because you don't want surgeries to end early. By 4, I was kind of freaking out. By dinner time, I was like, what's happening? This photo was taken at 9 o'clock at night. This is my wife, Tali, talking to another parent after the hospital had closed, and it wasn't until 10 p.m. that the pager finally buzzed. He was on bypass for 7.5 hours. Luckily, he was alive. He was alive, but he was on ECMO, which we had always been told was a last resort. Australia's a little different. They were like, it's kind of standard procedure to put kids on ECMO after this crazy long surgery, so whatever. So we came out on ECMO, and we were kind of freaking out. And we called his doctor in New York, Shubi, and we explained the situation, and she was obviously like emotional, and she said, I'm praying for you. So we're Jewish. She's Hindu. I said, who are you praying to? And she said, all of them. It was like a full spectrum flag, right? And I said, if you could pick just one God to pray to, who would it be? I need focus, right? And she said, Hanuman, who's the monkey god, right? I still do not know much about this, but I Googled it. And it's really interesting. When you Google Hanuman, he is often depicted as holding his chest open. Remember, our son is on ECMO with like little drops of blood coming out. I don't think Shubi meant this. I don't think that's why she said Hanuman. Inside of the 2 days, he's sworn to protect. He's like a protector, which I think is the real reason. But that was like kind of crazy. So we printed it out. We put it above his bedside. That night, they took a leap of faith. They pulled the cannulas, and his heart kicked in, right? And I did not convert to Hinduism, but I really came to respect faith as super important, not because of religious faith, but also as a point of connection between people. That even though we do not share the same faith, the fact that we have a certain faith is really an interesting point of connection, and that was really interesting. So finally, we're a little out of the woods, and Nadav's on the ECMO. I'm like, I'm going to go home, and I'm going to have a beer. No, you can't have a beer because at 6 o'clock we're going to have what's called a family meeting. You guys have family meetings? You have a room like this where you have family meetings? Okay. We were told that one of the doctors did the artwork on the walls, like whatever. Okay. We were called into a room for a family meeting led by the guy in charge of the NICU. We were not even in cardiology land. We were in, PICU land. A guy named Nick Piggott at Westmead. And Nick basically looked us right in the eye and said, here's the situation. Nadav has a high white blood cell count, and he's running a fever. And there are 3 things that could happen tonight. These are my actual notes. Actually, most of the stuff in this presentation is my actual stuff. We took notes. Maybe that's interesting too. Anyway, he said, one is that he could improve. That's not going to happen. The other is that he could hold steady, and that's what we're hoping for. And the last scenario is that he could deteriorate. And in that case, there's nothing more we can do for him. And I was like shattered in a million pieces. I was done. I held pretty strong through this, and that broke me. But my wife, Tali, who's incredible, unfortunately she couldn't be here, looked him right in the eye, looked Nick right in the eye and said, so what you're saying is that it's up to him. And Nick looked back at her and said, I suppose you're right. And Tali said, well, I can live with that because I trust him. Okay? So that was a level of faith that completely redefined the faith that I had, any sort of external deity. The fact that she trusted the intrinsic life force within him to heal was really profound for me. And in fact, he made it through that night and many more. I learned to have a lot of faith in that. I'm really interested in how doctors work and think. For some reason, I went to Nick long after this and I said, what's it like being on the other side of the table? I know what it's like. And maybe it's because I was worried about like having to tell bad news, right? Remember I said earlier? And Nick said, I tell my trainees 3 things. In a family meeting, you have to be honest and direct. You have to not give false hope. And you have to get the sex of the child right. It's super important. As one doctor misgendered Nadav, we never trusted them again for anything. Nothing. Seriously. Like, that was super important. And Nick's not a glib guy. He's a super serious guy. He's got a sense of humor. But, like, this is in the top 3. I think this is definitely in the top 3. I agree with that. So Nadav's stuck in hospital in Australia. Not only that, it's in the ward dedicated to, like, Sydney's sickest cases. Every morning I'd read the Sydney Morning Herald, and there would always be a story that ended in the words, the child was rushed to Children's Hospital Westmead. And you'd go into the hospital, you'd see that kid like a new neighbor, and it was like kind of crazy. And we would bombard these attendings with questions because they rotated in every 3 days. It was different than how we worked with a single cardiologist. And they would say, almost all of them would say to me, "You have to be patient because we have to get to know him." And in the States, that would be like a brush off, like leave me alone to do doctoring. And I think they were saying something different in Australia, which was, our job is not to heal your son. Only Nadav can heal himself. Our job is to put him in the best opportunity to heal, which is a subtle difference, but I think really, really important. And to do that, they had to get to know him. And they had to get to know him not just as a medical chart, but as a person. This is Yishay Orr. She's now at Texas Children's. She did this crazy surgery. And she followed him every day, a surgeon checking in every single day to see how Nadav was doing, which I thought was extraordinary. I mean, we love our surgeons here in the States, but they would never do this. Like, that was unusual. They got to know him. We got to know everybody in the ward. This is something that hangs in the beginning. When you enter the PICU, because everybody in the unit, we got to know every single one of them, and every single one of them was critical to Nadav's healing. Not just doctors, but child life, critical. I'm not saying that lightly. Critical to his healing. Nursing, obviously. I give a whole presentation about nursing. Read the book. There's a lot of really great anecdotes. We have a huge amount of respect for nurses. Therapy. This is actually Gloria, who is a speech therapist at Westmead. This is Nadav intubated. And we said, why are we getting a speech therapist if he's intubated? And she said, well, he can still communicate. Eventually learned him to gesture with his eyes, and then to actually talk while intubated, which I didn't know that was possible. That was really incredible. And then I have to mention these things called heartbeats. You see these in the States. We had another hospital where they had them. They were not anything special. They were these little dull things. The heartbeats are basically given out. Everything that happens in a hospital, you get a little bead for. Whether it's like a super scary procedure or like a happy day, you get like a little bead, which you put on a string. You can tell Nadav was there for a while because he has this huge string. But they're little works of art, and they're really precious, and they're really important. We still have ours. And I would just urge you, if you're working in this sort of area, to research how they do heartbeats in Australia. If you Google it or do a scholar thing, that's really, really cool and special. But all these have the upshot of bringing humanity in the hospital. And if you view the job of the patient is to heal, you have to approach it in a human way, right? You have to make them feel like a human and not just a patient. I think that's really important. They do things a little differently in Australia. These are some of Nadav's doctors. I kid you not. These are the clown doctors. These are the only doctors in Australia who wear white coats, by the way. Okay? There's a whole discussion to be had about that. But these were also medical professionals. They were not just there for comic relief. You could tell they had a deep intelligence, right, about how they approach their jobs. And they understood that to laugh is to be human and maybe speed the healing process. They would look at you when they came in the room. It's a good time. They could tell by the eyes. And if it was, they would just know exactly what to pull out of their pockets, like a ukulele or stickers or whatever. Extraordinary. But the biggest thing that they did differently in Australia, remember this is a really, really sick kid, critical care, intubated, is Nick insisted that he wanted to bring Nadav outside. Okay? And this was not done out of pity or palliative care or anything like that. This was because he's a human being, he needs to be outside. So they put him on travel vent, and they wheeled him out, which took hours, to the courtyard where he was able to feel the fresh air, watch his brothers play with a little umbrella over him. He was able to hold flowers and leaves, just incredible experience. Sorry. Hi.
Yes.
Whoever you are, hello. Welcome. At one point, Nick actually turned off the travel vent. And that's what you could hear. Nothing. Not even the white noise. And it was beautiful. And I said, why do you do that? He said, well, I just want to see how he'd react. Okay. Without Nick's permission, somebody even took him outside at night. I did not know about this apparently, but it was really nice to look at the stars. It was an incredible kindness and really, really important for us. Still in Australia, we were stuck. This is the kid who's battling aspergillus. His drains are off the chart. At one point, this is on a scale of 0 to 10, this one. So this is 9 liters a day. He's not a candidate for further surgery, and there's no medical reason for transport. We are really stuck in Australia. Until my amazing wife, Tali, who reads medical journals for fun, discovered this paper that had just been published, written by Jack Rome at CHOP, along with some of his colleagues, that talked about a novel procedure that they were doing, a Fontan takedown via catheterization, which was basically a possible way to revert Nadav's circulation to a more stable state without surgery. And Tali said to Shubi, who called up Dr. Rome, can you find out if he's a candidate for this procedure? And Dr. Rome said 3 magic words, I'll evaluate him. And that gave us a medical reason to come home. Remember, this is still a critically ill kid in an ICU. But Nick, who had been plotting this for a while, worked with the counterparts of the CHOP transport team to figure out a way. And suddenly we had Stacey Petty, who I don't know if any of you know, along with 2 amazing nurses and a respiratory therapist, got on a Gulfstream 3 in Philadelphia. They flew Philadelphia to Oakland, Oakland to Hawaii, Hawaii to Fiji, Fiji to Sydney. Met us there. And wheeled him on the plane. There were no illusions that this would work. Like we were told, there's a good chance that he might not make it, right? We knew there were risks. Along with Tali, and monitored him the whole time. Remember, this is a kid who's draining 9 liters, so they had to figure out like how to deal with the FFP and all that. And eventually, that's in Philadelphia, arrived at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia 24 hours later, which was an incredible miracle. It's funny, when they arrived there, they had travel vent, and it was the same travel vent that Nick used to bring Nadav outside. And I realized why Nick had turned off the vent. He had already been plotting this months before, and just wanted to know if that was a possibility. A kid traveling, what happens if the vent somehow goes down, which was like kind of cool too. So we arrived in Philadelphia, and we spent 6 months there. When I wrote my book, I was like, I said to myself, I want to get through this as quickly as possible because nobody's going to read about being stuck in CHOP for 6 months. And actually, a lot of people are very interested. So I'll tell you a little bit about our experience there. These are my calendars that we'd write the nurse down and what's going on each day. I think every parent probably keeps some sort of diary like that. At CHOP, we insisted on being part of the medical team. The problem with Nadav was his lungs. They would not clear. The procedure that had been done when we arrived was successful. It reduced the drains from like 9 to like milliliters, but there was still enough drainage that we would need a tube. Can't go home with a tube. So we spent 6 months trying to figure out how the hell to get this stupid drain to stop draining. And every day we looked at this cloudy X-ray. This is actually one of Nadav's X-rays. And Nadav, who was 4, he actually looked at his X-rays too. In fact, he insisted on being part of the rounds. The only time I got really, really angry at CHOP was when they skipped us from rounds one day. And I made that very clear. They never skipped us again. Because if you remember from my earlier points, like I really do think the medical area has to be a partnership. There are expertise that we have that we need to be a part of the conversation. We felt that very strongly. Nadav, too, wanted to be part of the conversation. They would wheel out him in a wheelchair. They'd point the X-ray towards him. He would sit there, and he would actually ponder it for a few minutes. He was an amazing kid. Like, I don't know what he knew about his condition, but I suspect a lot. And very few doctors like condescended to him. This is him learning to walk again. He learned to walk in Philadelphia to atrophy, and he had these things on his legs so that he could like learn how to walk. And one of the doctors who was new knelt down and said, "Have you worn your leg huggies today?" And the doc looked her right in the eye and said, "Knee immobilizers." Okay. I'm gonna get a little preachy. Names are super, super important. Okay, I don't know how you design your badges. Every badge in a hospital should be the first name in big letters that you can get, and it should be on both sides. I don't care about any of the other information as a parent, maybe if you're a doctor or nurse, whatever your role, the most important thing I need to know about you is your name. And often, like so many times, the badge is like stuck behind, whatever, it's backwards, and I forget people's names. I'll forget all of your names, I guarantee it. I don't even know who this guy is up front. But that's really important. If you're gonna be humans connecting with each other as partners, you've got to know each other's names. And in fact, doctors should know parents' names. We are not mom and dad. We're literally not mom and dad. Our kids call us Abba and Ima, right? So we're not mom and dad. And really, if we're talking to each other, I'd like to be called James. That's my name, right? So parents should also have the same badges on both sides so people know how they want to be addressed, right? That seems like a simple thing. But nobody ever does it, which is interesting to me. Okay. The other thing that was interesting was, if you take the premise that you need to be human to heal, obviously you need nourishment. Now, this is a kid who arrived while intubated, and we wanted him to drink. And nobody at CHOP was very happy with that idea because they were afraid of aspiration. Well, he drunk in Australia. He wasn't like down in bottles of water, but like he was enough so that his mouth was not dry, right? Or ice cubes are. They would not allow it at all. We fought them very hard on it. They gave us this thickener that you put in it, which is disgusting, right? And so we called it Philadelphia water. I don't want Philadelphia water. So these things ended up in the packet, in the bin, right? So we threw these things out and went off the map a little bit. But it was super important. This kid was really suffering without like liquid. He needed it. He's, as I said, he's a unique kid. When he was extubated, the first thing he asked for was sushi. So sushi. This is not the day he was extubated. He ate a lot of sushi there, actually. Luckily, the cafeteria had sushi. And then we started going down to the cafeteria as he was healing, and he kept on asking for pizza. There's something about like this situation. I've heard from other parents that it changes your sense of taste or smell. He wasn't a big pizza guy, but suddenly he wanted pizza all the time, and we realized that he didn't want pizza. Like he wanted the oregano that you sprinkle on the pizza, right? And he would dump like big buckets of the oregano on top and try to ignore the pizza. So that was interesting, especially when we found in the hospital there was this little herb garden. And so every morning we went to pick fresh oregano and we had it with our lunch, right? So maybe build a herb garden because that's kind of cool, right? Okay, I'm not joking. Okay, so Chop had one. We had to go find it. Nobody told us about this thing. We just started exploring the hospital as much as possible. In fact, we ran out of things to do, and I think on month 5, the exasperated child life person was like, "You've seen everything in this hospital." Was like, "Have you been to the basement?" We're like, "No, what's there?" The kitchens. No, we'd never been to the kitchens. So she took us down to the kitchens, which was super cool. Like they have huge buckets of oregano, and they have these walk-in freezers. For a kid, that's awesome to see that. This is the head chef, Nicole Solano at Chops. I think she's still there, and she was magnificent. And her and Tali, it's my wife, started talking. And Nadav had unique tastes, so like, what does he like to eat? And Tali said lamb. Oh, we have a halal menu. We have plenty of lamb. So every day she like sent up these custom meals for him, right? Which was great. And talking to her, it kind of blew my mind because you kind of take hospital food for granted and you think about how bad it is if you think of it at all. But she and the rest of the staff, they took their job really, really seriously, right? They said, we are critical in helping kids heal because we feed them. That should be obvious, right? But that was like kind of a really interesting perspective too. So that was an amazing experience. I want to bring up, because we're, Atlanta, I don't know if any of you know Jenny Preston. Yes, in Child Life? Yeah, so Jenny was our Child Life person at CHOP. And so this is her teaching Nadav how to shoot guns, I guess because we're from New York. She's the one who arranged that, so she couldn't be here, but we have a real special, so send my best. Okay, she's good. Okay, so I mentioned Australia got outside. At CHOP, we continued this. We tried to get outside as much as possible. The best people to know in a hospital are the security guards. For a couple of reasons. One, the way they do their job really reflects the personality of a hospital. I don't know if any of you have read like Anthony Bourdain's book, where he talks about like, if you wonder what a restaurant is like, you go to the bathroom and see what the bathroom's like, right? Because that tells you everything you need to know about how they approach their work. It's the same thing with the hospital with the security guards. And I bet yours are very nice. So thumbs up. So this is Starling Underwood. He was great. He was one of our security guards, and he was important because we wanted to go places, and the only people who go places in a hospital, even buildings that are under construction, are security guards. So we did that. We wandered every inch of this place. Eventually, we started going outside because we knew the healing value of fresh air. This is eating lunch outside. This is doing OT outside. This is having music therapy outside. The therapists thought we were crazy. Nobody ever asked for this before, but we insisted on it. We went for walks outside, always taking care to stick to the hospital grounds, right? Because that was important until it wasn't. We're like, well, if we go to the hospital grounds, why can't we go across the street? So we went across the street. I took him down to the garage because I wanted him to sit in his car. He hadn't been in our car for 9 months. So we sat in the car and was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then we're at UPenn, so Tali went to UPenn, so we did a little tour of UPenn. This is a Ben Franklin statue. This is definitely not on the CHOP campus. We went to a little pond that we discovered. One day the boys came down and were like, hey, look how fun it is to sit in the car. We sat in the car and we're like, why are we just sitting in the car? So we fired up the car and we drove around Philadelphia with him in the car. Because why not? Right? Like, we thought it was okay, and it was. It was great. I mean, look at the smiles on their faces. Look how happy they are. Okay? And we judged that risk, and we made a decision. And I think his parents were allowed to. I don't know. Eventually, we did have permission on July 4th to have our Independence Day. We had 6 hours out. It wasn't much fun because I don't think we were breaking the rules. Okay. Eventually, they figured out how to clear his lungs. It ended up being a lymphatic intervention by 2 doctors at CHOP who are pioneering lymphatics. If you work in the field of cardiology, please get to know that world, because I have a hunch that lymphatics are super, super important, especially for Fontan patients. Dr. Yoav Dori and Dr. Max Ikin, who do not work together anymore, are both experts in this field, and by all means reach out, because it allowed us to go home, this lymphatic intervention, in August. And that's me the day we left. And my wife Tali, being who she is, insisted when we got home that Nadav would go to kindergarten. So this is the public school across the street from our house. Remember, Nadav has been around the world, medical odyssey, he's on oxygen, he's not in great shape, but for us it was amazing shape. The poor school nurse, when we got there, must have been like, looking forward to skid knees, and suddenly she's had the world champion cardiac kid. But we had this kind of tense meeting when we were trying to arrange how it would work, because by law they have to accommodate you in a public school. And it got to this point where it's like, who's going to take him upstairs? Who's going to take him to the bathroom? There was a para, but it was still kind of tense. And then the teacher, who you see here, her name is Mary, looked me right in the eye during this first meeting and said, "Don't worry, we're human." And that was all I needed to hear. And Mary was amazing, because she understood kids. And this is one thing this experience taught me, is the strength of children, both sick and not sick, and what we can learn from them. Mary was super smart because she asked the doctor to come in on the second day. And on the first day, she explained to the kids what was going on in very honest terms. We always told all of our children exactly what was happening to the degree that we could, right? Even admitting we didn't know at times. And I'm sure that must have been difficult for them in the moment, but I think in the long term it's super important, because otherwise kids imagine these things. And she told the doctor's classmates, why he was wearing these silly things in his nose, like a cannula. If you're an adult and you see a kid in a cannula, most adults are like, they cannot get past it. They will never be able to look past it. But kids, if you explain what it's for, the dog needs extra oxygen to breathe, and this gives him the oxygen he needs to live. Kids are like, that's great. On to the next thing. They look right past it, right? And she told them what was going on with as much honesty as she could, and they responded. This is Charlotte, his friend, right? And Debbie is para, and this is actually in class. We thought he'd go like a day a week or half days, or he went every single day, and he was so proud and happy. And the reason that he had been able to do this and leave CHOP is because his body had found a way to repair this crazy circulation that he had by growing these things called collaterals, which this may seem like ordinary and not obvious to cardiologists, but to me as a parent, it's again, goes to this miracle of the body and how it heals. His body actually grew these extra veins to correct the improper circulation, which is nuts, unsustainable, unfortunately, but nuts. And again, he was the one who was healing himself, maybe in a non-optimal way, but it allowed him to come home. So here's the sad part. Being human is not always easy. Nadav died that January. This is what the drive to the hospital looked like for me on the Upper West Side. And it was really not fun to have to go through that. And I was suddenly faced with a moment that I had feared the whole time, which was how to tell our sons that their brother had died. And after everything that I just told you, I finally had the strength to do it as a father. I was able to do it. And the reason was because I realized I didn't have to explain anything, that there were some things that were beyond our understanding that I will never understand, both miraculous and terrible. And I did not know why. So I did not feel the obligation to have to try to explain it. I told them the truth, which is not an easy thing to do, but necessary. Parenting a rare child is really an incredible privilege. Really, I think most parents you talk to who are in this situation will agree with that, at least the ones I've talked to, which sounds a little counterintuitive unless you've been in it. And then losing a rare child is a really devastating loss for 2 reasons. One, you've lost the kid, which is terrible. But also, you lose a part of yourself. All these skills and all this identity that I've been talking about this whole time is suddenly not there. It's useless. I don't have to put an NG tube in a kid's, I wish I did, honestly, right? I don't have to know all these things. So after Nadav died, I decided to write a book. And the book sort of like opened this opportunity to reconnect with this world. So I've been able to give lots of talks at hospitals and conferences about our experience. And hopefully it helps people in your situation do a better job or learn something that might help you care for kids. I have to say, I have deep respect for all of you and what you do. I did not choose this. I did not have an option. You all chose to go into this as a career, right? That was a conscious choice that you made, and I'm very humbled and grateful for it. And it's great to be here with you in Atlanta and talk to you. And hopefully we'll have plenty of opportunities to talk today and afterwards. Like, I really welcome that. My email is on the bottom, or it's blocked. You can guess the last few words. It's that good. But I really welcome the opportunity to talk about this with you. If our story helps, it's a really gratifying thing. And in fact, one thing I have for you are these little envelopes, which have oregano seeds in them. So I have a ton of them, and Shona has some in the back, and if she runs out, I have more. So feel free to help yourself. It's really a special opportunity to be here. I'll just summarize by, I don't know if this qualifies for credits for any of you, but whatever, some things we learned along the way. Medicine is full of ambiguity. Miracles do happen, and they are miracles when they happen, even if they have a logical explanation. And there are some things that are beyond our control. Parents are part of the team. To heal is a really human act, and doctors are human too. So thank you for that, and look forward to meeting all of you and talking more about the ways in which our story might be able to help.
Well, thank you, James. Obviously, you mentioned that we all chose to be here, but you were obviously chosen to be the novice parents for a reason. And so we appreciate you sharing that with us.
Yeah, people say sometimes like, wow, like, we're just parents. Like, I would hope, and obviously there's circumstances beyond parents' control to prevent them from having this level of engagement. We were extraordinarily privileged in our journey. I don't deny that. Like, we had the best care, we were able to travel across, like, all those things are privileges. But I think, when you're put in a situation, any parent will aspire to rise to tackle it in the way they can, because that's what parenting is.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, but parents have to go through every day. It's, I think, mind-blowing. James will be spending some time with us today. He's going to be meeting with our Family Advisory Council later. Hopefully not telling them how to break too many rules, but the inside secrets are slipping out. And then he's going to spend some time with some of our trainees as well this afternoon. So I think we're very privileged that he's spending some of his time with us today. But we wanted to give we have a few minutes now just to open up if people have questions or a chance to really hear, from a parent, and it's interesting, we think of ourselves as clinicians, but to some extent, we're also dealing with consumers, right? And dealing with people who have to consume the healthcare we're providing. And I think we sometimes forget it's not just about the science and the medicine, but it's also about what else we do around that and everything else. And so this is a chance, honestly, we have a real great mix of people here from a variety of different places around the hospital. Please, raise your hand, grab a microphone, if there's any questions.
Yeah, and I'm not kidding about reaching out. Like, if there's something that you're in public, whatever, like, by all means. Go.
Yeah, Marcos, go. Yeah.
James, thank you so much. My name is Marcos. I'm one of the cardiac intensivists. I actually had the pleasure of meeting you and hearing the Nadat story out in San Diego at PCICS, and somehow this was even more moving. So thank you.
I have more time.
Thank you. I'm sure you're sort of used to sharing the story now, but I'm sure the vulnerability is difficult every time. So I'm very grateful. The question I have for you has to do with the idea of the relationship with families as a partnership, which I think resonates with all of us. But I find as a physician, that relationship is, there's sort of distinct moments where that's easier to do. So for you, at the point of having gone through everything, once you're through the Fontan, clearly you knew a lot of nuance, the medical sort of lingo, that's very easy to do. But I find for a lot of families in the beginning stages, they're emotionally overwhelmed, intellectually, it's so much information to process that the idea of a partnership sometimes can feel like almost putting a burden on the family, and for lack of a better word, being somewhat paternalistic, or sort of guiding them through those beginning stages, it looks a little different to me than it does later on. And so my question for you is, did you feel like there was a moment where you felt like your voice in that partnership required presence on morning rounds every day, like where that shifted for you? Or is it more that you felt like the partnership just looked different and in the beginning stages?
Yeah, that's a good point. First of all, I can only speak to our experience. I know you deal with a range of personalities and scenarios. I'm not saying that there's a one size fits all, but you have to treat every parent like you would treat us, for example, right? But I do think like starting on that assumption that like you have to find a way to communicate. And so that's like a really important thing. We were lucky to have an amazing doctor in Shubi who that was how she worked. Like that was kind of just how we expected it to be. We met another guy, the gastroenterologist at Mount Sinai, who was like, I have 5 minutes. Ask me anything you would like. Right? That was not working for us. And maybe some parents want that. Maybe some parents want to meet the magic wizard who's going to heal their child, right? I don't think in our situation, given the circumstance that we had, like in fringes of pediatric cardiology, that approach is really helpful, right? But I do appreciate that it is an incredibly hard thing for a doctor to be able to thread the needle between being a dispassionate expert and a weedy colleague, right? Neither of those things are right, and you have to find a middle ground, and it is not. I don't know how to tell you to do that, but I just think you should try to be able to speak to people in human terms wherever possible, and that we learn to trust our gut. A lot of the time, we just trust our gut. Is this a good doctor? I don't know. Sometimes you meet a doctor, they walk in and just like, yeah, it's not going to work. Is that irrational or is that like spidey sense? I don't know, but if it's not going to work, it's not going to work. Like we'd send people away, like who wouldn't help us. So, yeah, this doesn't quite answer your question, but from our perspective, that's how I would answer it.
Are there questions? Anyone? I'll ask one. I think obviously you've been through the worst part of being a parent when you lost Nadav and dealing with it afterwards. And I think, many of us unfortunately have to talk families through that. And I guess one of the things I always wonder, is years later, which part of those conversations around, especially the worst moments, do the parents remember or don't remember, the parts they do like or don't like? And I guess for us, it's, if you're able to reflect upon some of the interactions, the moments during those awful moments or those awful periods that really, whether positive or negative, things we can learn to be better about or not do or should do more of.
Okay, I'm going to half answer that and so maybe tack a little bit.
Yeah.
So we met a lot of social workers in our time, right? Okay. And they were like the whole spectrum. I never understood what a social worker did in a hospital context. I honestly did not, because some of them got us parking passes, and some of us were like the greatest therapists and sounding boards who I have ever met. Like it was literally on that spectrum. But I always, and this is very cynical, assumed that the social worker was there so that when the end came, they would know what to do. That's why they were there, right? They were sort of on call for like the worst happening, and they would step in and deal with it. Okay, and here's the irony: is that the night Nadav died, there was no social worker on call. We were like completely alone except for the nurses. They put us on the phone with like this child psychologist or something, which was completely unhelpful. It was terrible, right? So I think like having the right people there is super important, right? And have them trained in such a way that they, PAC teams are great for this, right? Palliative care, right? There's a lot of expertise in there that doesn't always percolate out. But yeah, I think that's how it is.
Was there a question on the web? Oh, Martha, yes.
Thank you very much for sharing your life with us. I really appreciate it. How did you manage the crisis fatigue that was inevitable in your journey?
Overate. I did. Stress eating. The psychologist in Australia, and by the way, that was the only unit that had a psychologist on it, was in Australia. That's not standard practice here in the US, which I think is a huge shame. And I know there's a health crisis in this country, but like that's a huge part of it. I told her that I was stress eating. She's like, well, you burn a lot of calories when you're stressed. Which is like a very Australian attitude, but yeah, you fall into bad habits. Like you yell at each other sometimes, you lose your temper, you're human, right? Like how would anybody cope with this? But you have to push through that, I think. And we relied on a lot of really important help from charities who give support, just unquestioned support to families. Ronald McDonald House in Philadelphia was a huge help giving us a place to live. While we were there were Jewish charities who stepped up for us and did like small and big things without question. So that support is really appreciated, but you do the best you can and you cope with maybe with healthy ways and bad, and you find your way. Yeah.
Probably not, just like me, but.
My favorite part of the story is just all the opportunities that you gave him while he was in the hospital, taking him out, putting him in the car, taking him to the garden, picking the herbs. I mean, that's amazing. I mean, I hope you look back and just are so grateful that you gave him all those opportunities.
We try to do that for all of our kids, whether in the hospital or not. Like, and maybe we go a little overboard. Like, we just drove down to Orlando with them. They went to the CHOP cardiology conference, which was crazy, but like, and they're teenagers now, so they're like a little sick of us doing that. And they just want to be left alone. But we tried to give them like as normal a life as possible, both in the medical care outside of the hospital setting. When we came home, there was like an oxygen tank, like there were all sorts of things going on. We tried to look past that and just deal with it as best we could. And for us, for some reason, that's movement, like just moving around. And doctors thought it was weird. Like Chief Ravi Shankar, who was our doctor and CHOP, was amazing, would say to us like, "You're never here." Like, why would we be here? What would he do here? He'd stare at TV or something, right?
Right.
Like, yeah. And the architecture and the ethos of the hospital is really important to that. Like, nobody told us there was a herb garden. It was in a completely different ward. We had to it was just in the spirit of exploring every nook and cranny of the hospital that made that happen, right? And I know there's considerations about transplant patients and having, like, I get all that, right? But sort of the infrastructure either works with you or against you. If the security guards hadn't let us do that, we wouldn't have done it. If the nurses hadn't turned a blind eye, obviously they knew what was going on, right? Like, then we wouldn't have done it, right? So it's like security guards, they balance rules and humanity, right? They're making judgment calls all the time. You kind of have to do that, but the humanity should come out on top every once in a while.
Hey, James, thank you so much. That was awesome. You faced a lot of information, heavy information coming at you, you and your wife. Do you guys process information the same way, or do you need different things in the moment?
Are you married?
I am married, and I'm asking because my wife and I are totally different, and I think that's a huge challenge for our clinicians to create those human connections, to break through when two people need dramatically different things in the same moment. Did anything happen? Did you have any tools for this? You know, like my wife blacks out, like she doesn't recall anything, but I want to process it. Like, did anything work for you guys that we could learn from?
Marriage tips you want. We're not talking the scope of this talk. So we are very different. We both have different interests. Like, she is an engineer. Like, she is really interested in like pressures and this and that. And I can speak that language, but that wasn't really my role in the hospital. I was more the diplomat, like the fixer a little bit, like trying to get stuff done and getting the right people to be in the right place at the right time and paying attention to that. I think a good marriage is complementary, where you sort of like both understand that. Being in CHOP made it a little easier because we live in New York. So we had to basically swap places every couple of days. Like, I was back in New York with his brothers and he was in Philly. It was like, the kids were divorced and sharing custody of us. Right? So we were like swapping, and that allowed us like the space, honestly, to take a breath and not, I think, and we learned this in grief. Everybody, and a lot of what we went through was anticipatory grief. A lot of what you deal with, the stress, is actually like wondering when the end's going to come, or if the end's going to come, or like feeling that crisis. And no two people grieve the same way, even if it's anticipatory, right? And my wife and I went through exactly the same thing, and we approached things very differently. Like, something I talk about a lot in the book that I don't talk a lot about in the talk, the decision to go to Australia, right? Like, should we have gone or not? We disagree completely about that in retrospect. Right. But I think having the grace to appreciate your differences is different. Like, I don't know about how doctors and nurses approach that. We did get peeks at the chart sometimes where they were like, "Dad's in a bad mood," right? Yeah, they exist, right? Like, they're not the medical records. You never saw them on the medical records, but I know they're in there. And sometimes I wasn't a bad, and I behaved badly. What was it? Maybe we behaved badly to each other. Maybe just like yelling at each other was a way to get out stress in a safe way, right? As long as it doesn't go too far, right? But it's like any marriage, but like to the max. Like,
Thank you. Okay, we'll do one more and then we'll probably have to, unfortunately. Thank you.
Hi, I work in the foundation and I work with our Grateful Patient Family Program, and often I deal with parents who have lost a child and want to give back or want to honor their child in some way. What words of wisdom or advice do you have for working with bereaved families?
I'm very hesitant to offer advice to anybody else, to be honest with you. And most parents who do something co-by like starting foundations and raising money and doing all that. I'm not comfortable doing that, so I wrote a book. I wrote a book mainly for his brothers, so that when they're old enough to know, like to appreciate it, that they'll know what we went through and how I approached it, because I think that's important to pass down to them. But the nice happy accident from that is it allows me to share this with other people. I think there's a huge chasm between there's a perceived huge chasm between parents of kids who are living and parents of kids who have died. We certainly felt that, but in practice, maybe that chasm is not as big as we thought it was. We've met plenty of parents whose kids are alive who we've had wonderful relationships with. So I don't know if I have advice, but I do completely understand that instinct to give back. And in that spirit, like, I totally mean it. Like, you, your department, any organizations you belong to, if any part of this will help you, let me know.
And we see
Yeah.
telling your story as a way to give back.
It may just be a way to tell your story, right? It may be a way to get it. Like, the reason I wrote the book in the very first place, I need to get it all out of my brain. I didn't want to lose it. So I just wrote it all down, and somebody's like, well, that should be a book, right? So writing, even if it's not to an end, is healthy, but grief is a whole different topic. And this is not necessarily a grief.
James, we really appreciate you sharing your story with us. Shoma and her team have put together a little basket as a token of appreciation. I don't think there's any Brave stuff in here though, right? Brave Maddox jersey maybe, you know? Yeah, but thank you again. He's here today, you know, I think he's meeting with some different groups, but we really appreciate everyone being here. Obviously, you know, like Marco said, like, I'm doing this for the second time and it still catches. There's so much to catch.
I'm always here, anytime, anywhere. I'm happy to come help if this helps you or your colleagues.
Thank you.
You want one? I have like tons. Yeah. Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for giving me an hour. Thank you, Jeff.